Hi everyone, good evening. So sorry, I think we've been having issues with the network, so I'll just try to add our guest again, our host rather. I'll try to add them now. Okay, okay. So I'm trying to add our host. Okay, I think we have a first our co-host. I think we have our co-host with us. Okay, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. So let me just introduce our host and our co-host. We're still waiting for Feko to join us. So our very first host, Ifeanyi Ibegbunom, known in the entertainment industry as Feko. Feko is a UK-based Nigerian hip-hop artist, animator, podcaster, and multidisciplinary creative, a trailblazer in African hip-hop. Feko became the first Nigerian rapper to perform in the metaverse and gained international recognition as the winner of the Mike African Season 1. His acclaimed podcast, Surviving Echo, received the APVA Award for Podcast Art of the Year in 2023. Currently, Feko hosts Real Talk with Feko, a podcast that explores real-life issues with authenticity and depth. Feko continues to innovate across platforms, building a dynamic career that bridges music, digital art, and storytelling. And then we have our co-host Awiti. Awino Awiti is a multi-award-winning podcaster recognized for captivating storytelling, passionate about mental health and personal development, known for her unique ability to engage listeners on a personal level. Awiti has created a space where untold stories are brought to life through the Unspoken podcast. Wow, 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 wow. Please, guys, let's show our host some love, rather, our host and co-host. Let's show them some love, please. Let's see those emojis if you are here. Feko, have you been able to join? I'm trying to add you again. Please, guys, let's appreciate our host and our co-host. Let's show them some love. Pop those emojis. If you are just joining, thank you for joining. Thank you, Mozioki. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Big Tibas. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Life of Hedi, for joining. Sambasa Podcast. We see you. Samongar, thank you for joining. Granaf Holmes, Nwangi, Kugoro. I think these people are from Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Mubas, thank you for joining. Okay, I'll wait for our host himself so you could actually like start it before our co-host. Okay, I'll try to add him again. I've been sending the invite. Thank you so much. Okay, Ganafa. Yeah. So if you're just joining, please let's share this live. Let's share it out. Let's share on our social media platforms. If you know any podcaster, anyone is willing to like go into podcasting, you could invite them. I feel like this is the place for them tonight. This is the place for them to be tonight. So let's share, let's repost on our social media platforms. While we wait for our host to join us, I think he's trying to. Okay. Yeah, I just accepted Feko now, so we have Feko here with us. Feko, I've accepted your request. Okay, you've been trying. Okay, I'll send the request again. I can actually see your request and I just accepted it.
Maybe he should check his setting.
Okay. Yeah, I think Feko. Sorry guys, sorry for the delay. I think our host is really finding it hard to like join. Um okay. I've seen your request again. And, okay, I think while we're waiting for Feko to join, let's just continue with our co-host. Awiti, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you for the time. Um, okay, I think you can just share with us what people really think. Like, what do you think people really? What do people really think podcasting is that it is not? Like, I think a lot of people have this like. Sorry, okay, I sent another request. I don't know. I think it's
Settings. One
yeah,
of you
it's a
should check
settings.
the
Okay,
setting.
yeah,
I
it's
think
trying to.
go to live settings and check if you can accept requests.
Okay, I think while we're still waiting, let's just know like a bit about you, Awiti. Um, as someone who has been in the industry, like, can you just tell us how and why you started as a podcaster? Like, how did you even begin and why? Why did you start as a podcaster? Like, just let us know while we wait for our host.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. So my name is Awino Awiti. I'm a podcaster from Kenya. I host a podcast called Unspoken Podcast, which is a podcast on personal and self-development. I started podcasting way back in 2020 when I was in my second year in university. That's when I started podcasting. And I think I started podcasting at the time I was starting a podcast. I was just starting a podcast because I was starting a podcast. I didn't have a reason for starting a podcast.
Finally.
Can I
Yeah,
continue?
continue. Finally. Thank you, Feko.
So yeah. when I started my podcast, I didn't like have a reason to start my podcast. I was just looking for an outlet. Because at the time, I think, of course, there was coronavirus at the time back in 2020, and I couldn't go back to work because I was interning at a radio station at the time. So when Corona hit, we couldn't go back to work. So I said, that's why my friend suggested to me that, okay, now that you can't go to radio, there's this thing called a podcast where you can talk about topics you're passionate about. So my friend suggested that. So I just did a little research and started podcasting. At the time when I started podcasting, mental health, I was passionate about mental health because it was something that I was struggling with, mental health, depression. It was something that I was struggling with back in campus. But so I started a podcast because I wanted it to be an outlet where I get to rant, I get to talk about the things that I like, I get to complain, I get to just talk about random stuff. So that's why I started my podcast. I didn't have any vision about it. I didn't know I didn't like have a clear vision, a clear mission when I was doing it, but I just started it because I started it mainly as an outlet for me to just to rant. It was like a ranting space. It was like a safe space for me to rant. That's when I started. That's the reason I really started it. But of course, over the past years, that reason has come to change.
Hmm. Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Actually, really, really impressive to see how much you've grown this far. Like you've been doing so well. And while you were talking, we had our host join us. Feko. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence tonight. Um, just as Nawiti just gave us, she just told us about how she started podcasting and why she started. So let's just start with that before we can go in on to this topic.
All right, guys. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I tried joining with my other accounts. I had to switch accounts. So this is actually my podcast account. Well, one of my podcasts anyway. So yeah, my name is Ifeanyi, fondly known as Feko. I'm the host of the Surviving Eco podcast and the Real Talk with Feko podcast. Um, from Nigeria, but I'm currently residing in the United Kingdom. And Jollof Radio is one platform that I believe every podcaster should join because it's a very strong community. And I've seen Jollof Radio grow from being a Nigerian community to being a Pan-African community, and which is what I've always been an advocate of, being a Pan-African. It's glad to see, podcasters from Kenya, Zambia, East Africa, West Africa collaborating. And I feel if we continue like this, definitely the podcast industry will become, bigger than it is today. So yeah, that's just a little intro from me, and I'm still here in case you have questions.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Feko. Thank you. So I think we can just begin now. So what do people really think podcasting is that it is not? And this is actually just to the audience, to those who are listening, who are watching, this is like an open mic discussion. So if you have contributions, if you have questions, you can send your request. We'll be accepting you to join us while our hosts are communicating, our host and our co-host. So you can just send a request to contribute or drop a comment in the comment section. So this time I'll just allow Feko continue from here. We're still waiting for our moderator Faith. She's going to join us. I think she's finding it hard to like send a request to. So Feko.
All right, welcome everyone. So the topic for today is why you shouldn't start podcasting. At first, when you see that topic, what will cross your mind is, um, are these people trying to like discourage us from being podcasters? And I think that's just like a clickbait. Actually, what we want to talk about are things you shouldn't do if you really want to start a podcast, as opposed to why you shouldn't start a podcast. So I'll leave this open. I mean, if you're in the comment section, feel free to contribute and interact with us as we proceed with this conversation. So for me, I listened to our co-host talk about, why she joined podcasting or why she became a podcaster in the first place. And the common factor there is passion. So for me, I think if you don't have passion for podcasting, you don't really have any business, with podcasting. Most people think podcasters are people that love talking too much. You don't necessarily have to talk too much for it to be issues and issues that are like really important, that's where podcasting, plays a pivotal role, because as a podcaster, you have the um, platform, to share your views and opinions about so many things across board. I see Sambasa in the comment section. He says, I feel that you need to have a plan for podcasting, and just like a business idea, you have to plan a podcast effectively. I absolutely agree, with that. As a podcaster, you need to have a plan, you need to have a strategy, you need to have like a target audience. Who are you trying to reach out to? Because trust me, there are like over 7 million podcasts right now. I was watching a video on YouTube the other day, and the speakers spoke about how the podcast industry is like oversaturated. So for you to stand out as a podcaster, your idea or your niche has to like be very unique, as a podcaster. So I feel like I've been talking too much. I'll allow my co-host to also share her opinion about, what she thinks about why you shouldn't start a podcast. Yeah.
Thank you. I think for me, what people think podcasting is that it isn't, mostly is that, for example, you find that you're a good storyteller, yes. You know how to tell stories, you like telling stories, you talk a lot, you're eloquent. So people think that nowadays, people think that once you're eloquent, once you know how to tell a story, or you have a lot of stories, or you know how to keep up a conversation, then someone will tell you that start a podcast. You're so eloquent, you need to start a podcast. But I think that's what people think podcasting is, but actually that isn't what podcasting actually is. For me, I think podcasting is, of course, you have to have a passion for it, you have to have a passion for storytelling, but then you have to have a passion for telling impactful stories. It's about impactful storytelling. That's what I think podcasting is. It's about telling impactful stories, and not just telling stories because we're telling stories, or not just being on a podcast because you think you're eloquent, or not just being on a podcast because you think you just have something to say for the sake of saying it. That's what I think people are misguided about podcasting. I think for a podcast, you need to be passionate about it. You need to know why you're starting it, and you need to address issues as they come, because that's why you're on that platform. That's why people are going to come to your platform, because of the topics you're passionate about, because of the matters you're passionate about, because of how you address your matters, and if those things that you address, if it is impactful to them, if someone is going to listen to your podcast and be able to be impacted by your podcast. So that's what I think podcasting is about. It's about creating impact through storytelling, basically.
And do you think the audio and production quality of the podcast is another factor that you need to consider in terms of like, you know, creating good content or being a good podcaster? Do you think if you have poor quality in your audio production, you have less people engaging with your podcast?
Very true, very true. Audio quality is what is up there in people supporting your podcast. Audio quality is very important because people love quality things. If your content is quality, if your audio has good quality, people know that you put in the work. You
Mhm.
actually know what you're doing. It will seem like you know what you're doing. You put in the work. You invested in your
Exactly.
craft. So definitely audio quality is one of the main things, because it's one thing. It's, I think even just to record one podcast episode, it requires a lot of
Mhm.
planning. It requires, you have to do your research. You have to know how to. That's when editing skills come in. You need to know how to edit. You just can't record and then you post. Like, it has to, there's a way your podcast has to flow. So definitely you have to look on audio quality. You have to learn how to structure the podcast. The structure of the podcast is really important. There's the introduction, there's the hook, the cliffhanger, that like when someone listens, when, of course, like you said, that the podcast market is saturated, so there are a lot of podcasts out there. So what makes you stand out? Are you just like any other podcaster? So what makes you stand out? So your quality and how you structure a podcast, that can really make you stand out. So you have to know how your podcast is gonna flow. It's something when someone is scrolling, maybe on Jollof Radio, and of course there are a lot of podcasts in that category, and then they
Mhm.
stumble on your podcast and then they press play. You have absolutely 5 seconds to impress that person to continue listening to your podcast.
But
It's how your podcast begins.
yeah,
Because there are a lot of podcasts, so you just have 5 seconds to redeem yourself. You have 5 seconds to prove to yourself that that person should continue listening to your podcast, or should press and go to the
I
next
totally
podcast. So
agree.
definitely, yeah, definitely
Mhm.
you should check. All your audio quality is important. You have to get the skills on how to edit, how to structure a podcast, the intro, the cliffhanger, the ending, the hook, the guests to have on the podcast, the conversation, how the conversation is flowing. So definitely audio quality is one of the most important
Yeah,
things.
but I do have a question.
Yeah.
You're talking about audio quality now, but I want to believe that when you started, or for me, speaking for myself, when I started, my audio quality wasn't like 100 because I started using my phone at first. I don't know about you. What was like the
Me
first
too.
thing?
I started using my phone. Yeah, I was using my phone
Yeah.
in the beginning.
But I think what we should also outline is that even despite the fact you're using your phone, it doesn't mean you can't improve the quality. Making the best out of
Definitely.
nothing. I think that's what people should really look into. Whether you're using your phone or your laptop, there are ways you can actually improve the audio quality. So you don't necessarily have to have like a Rode microphone or a Focusrite microphone before you start producing like top tier content.
Sorry,
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah.
sorry for
true.
interrupting, please. Sambasa podcast, are you trying to join us? Please, you can actually send your request in, so we'll accept you to join us. You can go on.
All right, then also there's the issue of time commitment, like creating time to edit your podcast. For me, it takes me like 3 hours to edit a 30 minutes podcast. I don't know about you. How long does it take you to edit your podcast?
Uh, about an hour. It depends on how long the podcast is. It
Mm-hmm,
depends on how long the episode is.
mm-hmm.
So if it's longer, definitely it's gonna take longer. And if it has a lot of edits, it
Pauses.
has like a lot of audio that I have to mix
Mm-hmm.
together, definitely it's gonna take longer. So it depends on how the podcast is, but mostly 1 hour, 30 minutes to 1 hour, depending on how long the podcast is and how I want it to sound.
Well, if it takes you 30 minutes, then that means I need to outsource my editing to you because you edit faster than I do. So maybe moving forward, I'll send my podcast to you so you edit for me. Because then it's really impressive. It takes you like 30 minutes. Because trust me, I like taking my time. So most times it takes me like maybe 2 hours to like edit, because I'm very particular about the kind of quality I put out there.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. Then
So yeah, definitely.
no, go on. Sorry, go on.
So yeah, it requires commitment. That's what people don't know. It requires a lot of commitment,
Hmm.
and that commitment can also be draining. It can drain you. I feel like if there's a platform, if there's a content creation platform that is so draining, it's actually
Mm.
podcasting, because I feel like putting yourself out there, especially if you if you upload each week. For example, I upload 2 episodes a week. So it's actually always so draining putting yourself out there and maintaining energy each episode. It's like so draining. So it takes a lot from you. It takes a lot from you.
Yeah.
So the
So
question is, you have to ask yourself: Are you doing this? Are
exactly.
you in it for the long haul?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you willing to commit the time in
Are you
editing?
willing to
Yeah, so
commit?
if the answer
Yeah.
is no, then you don't have any business starting a podcast.
Mm.
Once again, for those that are just joining us, the title of this controversial series is Why You Shouldn't Start a Podcast. So far we've spoken about um, the high competition in the podcast industry. If you know you're not ready for competition, then you don't have any business being a podcaster. Also, you need to look out being unique as a podcaster, creating a niche for yourself. And thirdly, we spoke about audio quality, making sure your audio quality is up to par, and also committing time in editing your podcast. And once again, for those that are just joining us, my name is Feko, and I have my wonderful co-host from Kenya, and she has also made like fantastic contributions regarding this topic. Also, we see Sambasa. We really wish Sambasa can join us in this session because he has so much to say. I've been reading his comments so far. He just dropped another one. Um, Here he said, factor in grace and time. Oh yeah, he has joined us.
Hey,
Welcome, Sambasa.
what's up? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Fine.
Nice to have you here.
Oh, nice to have you all.
Yeah,
I'm a fan of Jollof Media, so it's an honor to actually, kind of hang out with you guys today.
yeah.
And
Mm.
yeah, nice topics though.
So you spoke about your podcast being like an encyclopedia,
Right.
for future references. Do you want to like enlighten us a bit more on that?
Uh, so the reason why I call it an encyclopedia is because whatever you put in there is gonna have a historical effect. Like for
Mm-hmm.
example, any one of you putting down something um, in the future, let's talk about 10 years from now. If you're ever to start podcasting and then somebody needs to write a reference about something, or maybe they're going to make a topic regarding something that they're talking, let's say mental health, and they can actually come to your podcast and say, in episode 20, this podcast, this person said this and this and this. They'll actually use you as a reference. So whenever you're doing a podcast, don't look at it as, oh, I'm just talking to just talk. No, you are talking to engage people and to put in a record of what you are saying. So whatever you're saying is important, not now, but also to the future.
True. I totally agree. Even sometimes I think your podcast material can be referenced for a movie production, just like an adaptation of novels, Things Fall Apart, Half of the Yellow Sun. A movie director might just hear something on your podcast or a topic you spoke about, and the person might be like, "This is really brilliant. Can we make a movie out of this?" And you never know, that can translate into like millions for you in terms of like royalties. So yes, I totally agree with you regarding your podcast being an encyclopedia for future referencing. But coming back to the topic, so the topic is why you shouldn't be a podcaster. And like I said before, we are not trying to discourage people from going into podcasting. We're only trying to like list out the things you need to put into consideration if you really want to go into podcasting. And so far, we've spoken about the competition in the podcast industry. If you're not ready for the competition, then it means you're not really ready to be a podcaster. Secondly, we spoke about audio quality. We spoke about what was it again? Committing time in terms of like editing your podcast. And on a lighter note, I asked my co-host how long does she take in editing her podcast, and she told me 30 minutes. I also like to hear from you. How long does it take you to edit your podcast, Ambassa?
I'll say 1 or 2 minutes. Now, this depends upon
Okay.
how um how you start, and you're right. The engagement part. I think 1 minute. You have at least 1 minute tops for somebody to realize, is this the direction I'm going?
Mm,
Um, I have a very interesting. I'm going to put up an interesting video very soon regarding one of a lady from Zambia. She does podcasting as well. Amazing conversations. I think assorted conversations, assorted stories podcast, and she started off as a listener of podcasts. And at this point, I caught her off guard when she's starting to explain how she listens to podcasts and how she started becoming a podcast. So it's just a snippet, but it explains what she thought of back then when she was a listener to podcasts. Now she's a producer. She produces her own podcast. So it was a very interesting conversation we had, and I'm going to put up that video, and maybe it might give us an idea of how somebody looks at podcasts. But I think a minute is what you have. Personally, I'll give you a minute. Also, I think I'll give you grace because of what I'm trying to get out of you. Like if you told me, like fake, it's fake, right? Uh, the
Feckle,
part.
Feckle.
Yes, I'm sorry, Feco.
Yeah.
Feco, your podcast is about you talk about, from whatever you've been introduced. You have an interesting conversation regarding your being the first guy to be on Meta, and you're a rapper, and you have interesting stories. Okay, if I'm listening to it, I want to listen more. So I'll catch one, give it a minute, Do I like this one? I'll go look at another one. Do I like it? Then maybe I'll figure out one that I really want, depending on also the topic. So the topic will also interest me. Then I'll give you the 2 minutes, right? So
Okay.
basically, at least you'll get 3 minutes of my time. Then I'll be like, yeah, I like this one. Let me listen to it. And then from there, I'll make a judgment whether I'm going to subscribe to it or come back to it later on and listen to more of your episodes. That's my way of looking at it. Maybe other people have different ways of doing it.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I also agree. Same thing with rap music or music in general.
Yep.
If you're listening to music, if you don't like the intro, you skip to the next song. So the first, 1 minute has to be like really catchy for you to continue listening. So yeah, it's something I actually factor into my production or my podcasting process whenever I'm recording. Then also there's the issue of promotion and marketing. A lot of people just record podcasts, but they don't really put in effort into pushing their podcast or promoting their podcast. They believe, by magic it's going to go viral, or, they don't need any form of investment to push. I personally, I take out time to, like, sponsor some of my posts on my Instagram page. And I also, look for ways to promote my podcast. So as a podcaster, if you're not ready to market or promote your podcast, then it means you're not really, serious about being a podcaster. Also, I'm going to relate this to music because, like I said before, I'm also like an artist and podcaster. As a musician, if I don't push my songs, then it means I'm just wasting my time on production. And the funny thing, these days it's even more expensive promoting songs than actually producing those songs, you know. So yeah, and what's the point producing something that people will not listen to at the end of the day? So that's why promotion and marketing is very, very important. And I would like to ask you guys, how do you promote and market your podcast? Maybe that would inspire someone out there who's aspiring to be a podcaster, as to how they can use like little budgets and achieve more in terms of marketing and promotion. I'll start with Sambasa, and then our co-host can conclude.
Oh, let me do ladies first.
how, how do I market my podcast? You just threw me under the bus. Okay, how do I market my podcast? Mostly, the first thing I do, I collaborate with other podcasters. That's the first thing I did, and the thing I always do, I collaborate with other podcasters, and I think that's the easiest way to market your podcast as a beginner. You tap into your friends' audience. You tap into their audience by collaborating with them. You can be a guest on their podcast, and then you can invite them to be a guest on your podcast. So that's something I've done, and it has been able to help me market my podcast, to grow my podcast, because I've been able to tap into the other podcasters' audience. Another way that I've been able to market my podcast is by doing community projects. By doing a lot of community projects, because basically my podcast is about mental health, is about personal growth, it's about mental health and personal growth. So I've been able to do a lot of community projects by going back to my high school, I've been able to go to a couple of high schools to talk to people about mental health and everything. And actually those people listen to podcasts. They actually know what podcasting is. I was even shocked when I went to those high schools and I'm asking them their favorite podcasts. They actually listen to podcasts. And even now that schools are closed, those people consume a lot of content. So that has really helped me to market my podcast, because I've seen that once I go to even one school, I can see the change, because I'll see someone commenting there on one of the podcasts. Yes, I remember you came to my school. So what I said back when I was there, like, it impacted them, and they came back and listened to my podcast. So I've been able to market my podcast through community projects, because I am passionate about that, and that's what my podcast is about. I've been able to grow my podcast in that manner. Another way I've been able to market and grow my podcast is, of course, networking. Actually, nowadays there are a lot of podcasting events, there are a lot of creator events always there. If like almost each month, there are like at least 2 events related to podcasting or that is related to other creators. And going to those events, I've been able to market my podcast because, of course, once you're a creator and you meet other creators are always eager to listen to know what other creators are doing. So I've been able to go to those events and I pitch my podcast. I tell each and everyone. I make it a point that if I go to a certain event that I talk to more than 20 people and tell them about my podcast. And once I meet those people out there, I can see they always it's like, let me say 65% of them are gonna go back and listen to my podcast if I told them about the podcast. So that has also helped me be able to grow my podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I agree with you with the
Yeah.
cross collaboration strategy. It's a very, very good one. I also do that a lot.
Okay, so for me, I'd tell you this: planning. The number one thing is when you start your podcast, you have to plan. You're not going to get anywhere without that planning. So, promote podcast will start off with day one. When are you releasing it? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. When do you record? Are you doing a live, or are you doing pre-recorded and then you throw it out there? You host it out there. So at that point, you will now say, how will I tell people that I am going to have a guest on the show? If it's a live, usually that's, there are those guest issues where you have guests not coming and all. That's another story. But the thing is, you will say 5 days before this, I'll have plans. So you have a calendar, like a 1 month calendar where you put in. Right now we have collaborative shows, and we have a 1 month calendar that's out there. We know who the guests are coming, and we can start promoting the guests a week before and say, so-and-so is coming to the show. They've already booked, signed, sealed, everything, and it's there. So now that's your promotion ahead of time. You have your channel, you have your group of people, Instagram, and anywhere you go to, you tell people, hey, this is the person who's coming to my show. You send it out there, WhatsApp groups and everyone. That's your promotion for starters. Then when it comes out there, then you create those snippets, like YouTube has snippets. As soon as it comes out, throw out those snippets, little bit of snippets, maybe take 3 of the best content you have in there, and then throw it out there to the people. As I'm going to put this analogy like chicken. You want to feed chicken, you throw in some corn or maize out there, then the chicken will come and eat it. So that's how you will get people to come back to your podcast. Now, Awiti, you talked about collaboration, and here's where it'll be hard. And I think Feko, you can relate to this. When you're a singer and producing songs, and this is just an example, right? Burna Boy doesn't know you, but when you tell Burna Boy, hey, I'm out there, I have content, then Burna Boy will tell his people, hey, this guy got content, let me go. So you have to create a library of content for him to go and say, oh, wow, this is a guy this is nice music I can hear, I think I can collaborate with this guy. So before you go out and ask for collaborations, and I want to be honest with you guys, and I've seen it with me. When I didn't have any topics, anything to put out there, nobody will know who you are, and nobody can tell or judge, oh, can I collaborate with this person who is established or not established? But once you have episodes coming out there, at least 10 episodes, then you will create this this catalog where someone can say, oh yeah, they talked about this and this and this, I can relate to that, we can collaborate, and they can choose and say, we can collaborate with you on this part. And Awiti, I like the fact that you are actually going back to the community and the schools. I wish I could be able to do that with diasporan people and diasporan kids, to let them know about podcasting. I think this should go out to all podcasters that are out there right now. Go back to your high schools. Go back to high schools. Teach the kids how to get into podcasting or listen to podcasts, because that's the new gen coming up. And once you start that idea into their heads, it'll keep moving. And once it keeps going on, then you create a following for yourself. And don't look at it as yourself personally. Create it for the rest of humanity, right? And most people will say that, you know what, when people are talking about podcasting, Awiti came to our school and talked to us about podcasting way back when. Someone will always remember that. And I think that's one of the greatest things I've heard so far, out of the many that, touched my heart at this point. So we can continue.
All right. Thank you so much for your contribution. And the analogy about Burna Boy collaborating. I like that because I've actually
Yeah,
I've actually
true.
worked with
Actually,
artists
never thought
from
about.
from from
Yeah, give
Kenya,
me.
and I've actually worked with artists from Zambia. I've worked with Zone Fan from Zambia. I've worked with Calligraph Jones from Kenya. And before they even like worked with me, they had to like check out stuff I've done before. And yeah, that was how we were able to work together. So
Yeah,
yes, and also regarding
true.
Awiti's suggestion in terms of like educating our community about podcasting, I think it's also a good way to create more awareness about podcasting. I'll share a very brief story before we round up. So in my school, and this is in relation to what you and Awiti, talked about, educating the kids and everything about podcasting. So now in my school, we make presentations in terms of like a dragon den presentation, or you just pitch, or you create a pitch deck or something. Recently they introduced what they call like a podcast themed presentation. So you make it more interactive. You sit down with your team members, and then you make your presentation like you're having a conversation on a podcast episode. And we did that recently, and my lecturers were like, "Oh, you're a natural." And I told them, "Look, I have a podcast. This is what I do for a living." And they actually enjoy the presentation more that way. So I think it's also an innovative way to like, make presentations in school, and, kind of like reshaping how our syllabus have been structured, especially like in African schools or even in the diaspora. So I totally agree with you, like, extending this to like the diaspora community, and educating them about podcasting. And I think that's the future in terms of creating awareness regarding podcasting. So far we've spoken about so much. Okay, yeah, you want to say something?
One slight thing. I just forgot to say, my son had a project in school to do about a podcast, and can you imagine? He did not even use my equipment. Did not even ask me to help him out. All he asked was to interview his cousin, and that was it. I tried to help him out with the equipment and everything, and I have quite good equipment, but he just decided to use his phone,
Wow.
which is which is quite funny. But the point is, at least he got the idea. I gave him some pointers of how to ask, what to ask, and let him do what he had to do, because it was his thing. And I think that's probably like something the CBC would do in Kenya sometime in the future, or maybe when they start doing podcasting as a subject.
Yeah. I'm seeing someone has a question.
Yes.
Or someone has a question.
Simply, bro. Do you want to read the question that we see?
Simply Broad is asking, how important is money or the plan to make money from your podcast when starting out? Ooh, the money question.
Yeah, it's good to have that at the back of your mind. Return on investment, just like any other business. But I think when you start out as a podcaster, you shouldn't be looking at making money immediately. Try and grow your audience, try and grow your followers. Have at least like maybe 1,000 followers before you start thinking of making money from your podcast.
Yeah, like you shouldn't go in. Money shouldn't be the first thing in your mind when you're starting a podcast. If it is, then you're gonna go the wrong path, my brother. Let me just tell you. Like if that's the first thing that, hey, me, I'm starting this podcast to make lots of money, you're gonna get lost. Like it shouldn't be it should be in your mind, but it shouldn't really be the first thing. It shouldn't be your greatest motivation to start a podcast, that's to make money out of it. It shouldn't be your main motivation. It should be there. It's an important factor, but it shouldn't be the main thing that drives you to start a podcast. It shouldn't, because if it is the main thing, you're gonna be disappointed. you're gonna give up. You're gonna like really give up. You should have it in mind. Of course, you should have a plan of making money in future with the podcast, but it shouldn't be your main reason for starting a podcast. It shouldn't be what drives you to start the pod. No, if it's that, no, you're gonna. But you have to think about it. But you have to just structure. You have to I think for as a beginning podcaster, you should start your podcast with zero budget. You should run your podcast with zero budget. You should know how to run your podcast with zero budget and with nothing. You should know how to, you should have that structure that your podcast can run with zero budget as you're starting, as a beginner. There are ways, even when I started my podcast, like I did my podcast for like I say 2 years when I was in university, because I was a campus student. Of course, I didn't have money for a budget for a podcast when I was in university. No one has a budget for that. So I used to like do my podcast with zero budget. When back in school, there are things like our media. There's like media. You should look for outlets that can support your brand, that can support your dream. I think the first is as a beginner, as a beginning podcaster, the best way for you to run your podcast with zero budget, to start your podcast, is to have an idea and sell that idea. Sell your dream. People buy into dreams. People will buy into your dreams. If you have a great idea, and if you have this big dream surrounding it, and you have like a plan, of course, you need to have a plan for your idea. And then you sell that idea to people. You sell that brand. Me, when I was starting a podcast, I didn't even have like any equipment. And I think my first microphone was bought to me. Was somebody, it's like a supporter, is the one who bought for me my first microphone, my lapel microphone, because they believed in what I was doing, because I sold the dream. They would see my work, they would see how consistent I was. I was recording with my phone. And nowadays, they actually can just do your podcast with their phone, because nowadays phone have like a very good microphone, which is very clear. If someone won't even know, it's very clear. So you start with your phone, and there are a lot of free editing sites. Like, you're good to go. I like the secret to people investing is your dream. You sell the dream, and then your content. This content is king in everything. Content will sell you. Content will sell you. Even if you don't have nothing, your content will sell you, and your dream. You sell the dream. Just sell the dream. Me, I used to have like, I have vision. I remember I was even like, after I finished school, when I was doing my podcast with no money at the time, I just had the lapel. I remember there was a studio in Kisumu where I grew up. They just sponsored me for 1 year because they believed in my dream. They sponsored me. They saw my work. They knew what I was doing. They just sponsored me. And people believe in dream. Tap into that. People, sell your dream to people. People will just help you free of charge. If you sell your dream, and you actually have a plan on what you're doing, and you're so passionate about it, and then you're consistent, and then you work with what you have. That's where I say start with what you have, work with what you have. If you do that, and you have this dream, you have this big plan, and you sell it to people around you, people are gonna buy into that dream, and people are gonna invest in you. So don't let money be the first thing that it's on your mind. And then once you do that, you grow gradually. And even as you grow and you do this incredible work, and you have this plan and strategy, money is gonna just come in. Like, sometimes someone just say, I like what you're doing, how can we support? I like what you're doing, how can we support you? That's how it just goes. But let money not be the first thing that drives you to start a podcast. It should be there, but it shouldn't be the first thing. Learn how to start your podcast like with a zero budget. Have like a zero budget, but have a plan, and then have a dream and sell your dream. That's what I'm gonna tell you.
Awesome. I mean, on that
I,
note, I think
I
this.
will try to.
Okay.
Sorry, I wanted to add a small thing about podcasting with regard to how to make money. Now, simply broad, if you have a business already started and you want to start a podcast, you can use that podcast to make money out of that business you have. Maybe you have a t-shirt brand company, and then you can talk about brands. You can talk about anything on a podcast, and that will be your extension to bring followers. And then the followers will be like, okay, Simply Broad has this company where maybe he sells items, or he is a public speaker. What he talks about, what he's passionate about, then we can hire him to do such and such a business. So there's that aspect. You can try to get, you can start your podcast from the get-go as a money starting venture. But otherwise, yes, as Awiti says, when you're starting podcasting, you can have, depending on what you're doing, you can start off just small, talking about what you have. Create that equity in yourself. And then when you create that equity, people will now be able to say, hey, this looks like a podcast that we can put in money for. This looks like a podcast where we can advertise our products at. And one thing is collaboration putting yourself out there, going everywhere to like conferences, see other speakers, and also sometimes you have to invest in yourself. Now that's where investing comes. You have to spend money to go out there, and you have to spend it wisely. You go out there, put your name out there, then you come back and see, if I made $100 investment, what did I get out of that $100 investment? Then now you start, that's when the money sense starts coming in, and then you create an LLC or whatever type of business you wanted to start off, and then at that point, then you start looking at money. That was my addition to that topic for you, Simply Broad.
Okay.
True.
Awesome. Um, yeah, so in summary, don't make money like the first thing that motivates you before you start podcasting. In the long run, you're going to make money if you have a good plan. And just like Awiti said, if you have a great idea and if you create equity in yourself, you definitely make money. So just to recap everything we've said so far before we round up, once again, the topic is why you shouldn't start podcasting. First and foremost, you shouldn't start podcasting if you can't deal with the competition in the industry. You shouldn't start podcasting if you're not willing to make your audio production quality, up to par. And this does not mean that you should purchase like expensive equipment. Even with your phone, you can still record your audio and make sure the quality is like, very good. Also, in terms of monetization, don't put money first. You make money in the long run, but concentrate on growing your followers first before you start thinking of monetizing your podcast rather. And what else? Did I miss anything, Awiti, as we round up? If you want
No.
to add nothing, okay. So yeah,
Oh,
this
something I wanna add. Something I wanna add is why you should start a podcast. It's because it's hard to grow your
yeah.
audience. You have to be very patient. That's one of the hardest things. That's one of the hardest things about starting a
Mm.
podcast. They don't tell you about listeners. You might be talking to yourself at some point, so you have to be really
True.
patient. Yeah. Sometimes you have to be you have to know that it's really hard to
Mm.
grow an audience, a podcast audience, an engaging audience.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to you have to have that in mind. So you have to be really
Mm.
patient and have strategies in place to help you grow your audience. So you have to be patient with yourself. Be
Yeah.
very patient.
And
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, but it's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
And once again,
say,
we're not discouraging anybody from
Yeah, we're
starting
not
a podcast,
discouraged.
like I
You
said.
just have to
Yeah.
be patient.
Just know what
Yeah.
to do before you start your podcast.
so if I throw in this fact and tell people there are, as of last week, 7 million podcasters or podcasts out there in the world,
Yeah.
and you are
7 million.
part of those 7 million, what effect will you make? Because you're like a drop in the
Mm.
ocean, but you have to
Mm.
be somewhere within your
What makes you stand out?
exact.
Yeah, what makes you stand out? What makes you stand out? So
But
that's the big
you always
question.
stand out with your
Yeah,
content,
you always stand out.
and whatever you're out there, it's your content, your passion, and your consistency. Those three things
Consistency.
will
That's one thing I
be.
forgot to mention. Consistency.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
was saying
And
I
then I
forgot to mention
think,
consistency, and you mentioned it already. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
yeah. And then I think another thing, why you shouldn't start a podcast, another thing that you really have to have in mind before starting a podcast is have a clear understanding of the demands that come with podcasting. It's I think like podcasting just is not just having a mic and an idea and something to talk about and then you are good to start a podcast. You need to really have a clear understanding of the demands that come with podcasting, of what it comes. It requires skills. You have at the end of the day, you still have to have skills. You might have the money to hire a team and anything, but at the end of the day, you need to invest in your skills. You need to have skills. It needs stamina. It needs stamina. It needs skills and a genuine. You have to genuinely love the medium. You have to genuinely love podcasting. You have to genuinely love it. Don't just do it because people are doing it. You have to it has to come from a passionate place. You have to really love it
Yeah.
for you to be there for a while. So you have to clearly understand the demands that come with podcasting, you have to invest in the skills, you have to invest in the platform, invest in yourself, and then you have to clearly love it. I think if not passion, if not consistent, passion is the thing that drives you. Your passion is the thing that will always drives you. Your passion is the thing that will always make you show up and upload each episode. Your passion is the thing that will make you upload each episode. You even if you have passion, you like want to invest and have more skills. So have that in mind. Have a clear understanding of what podcasting is, the demands that come with it. Yeah.
And I
Thank you
think,
so much for your. Okay. Go on,
what
Sambasa.
about strategy? Because you got to be strategic in what you do.
Yeah.
Because when you start off, I think strategy will come in like the demands. It is demanding and it's also strategic. You have to look at, maybe when you start your podcast, you look at 1 year from now, where will I be in my podcast? My strategy was always, I would have now put only Sambaza, the podcast, like the way it's showing here, Jollof Radio. I used the image to create the brand itself. So the brand came first for Sambaza before you saw me, the person, even before I came out onto video. I had to start off with the Sambaza itself to give itself a name. So when I come on right now, my strategy is now you see me the host of Sambaza podcast, not me as Sambaza. See, I'm the host of Sambaza, the brand. So that's my strategy. People should come up with strategies like that, and say, okay, if within a year, if I'm doing 1 episode a week, I should have 52 episodes, or and when I get to 52 episodes, how do I celebrate? Celebrate your wins and celebrate your challenges. How do I look at that? Because there are always going to be those challenges that you will get along the way, and you'll have to be strategic about how you're going to maneuver them and get up there. Same with the wins that you have. So yeah, you got to be strategic in some way.
Awesome. So we've come to the end of this session. I wish we could keep talking for long because it's over an hour. And thank you so much, Awiti. Thank you so much, Sambasa. And a big thanks to Jollof Radio for organizing, this wonderful session. And please make sure you guys follow Jollof Radio. Download the app. It's on iOS and Android. And follow Jollof Radio Media. And if you missed anything we've spoken about so far, I believe this session will be saved on the Jollof Radio page, so you can always visit it whenever you chance, and watch it and share it with your friends. Thank you so much, guys. Before we leave, I would like to ask you guys one last question. What's your favorite podcast? Starting with Awiti.
Ah, my favorite podcast. There's a Kenyan podcast called Mic Check Podcast. I have a couple of favorites.
Just one.
Of course, I don't have
Just
one
one.
favorite.
Just one.
No, I can't say one. I can't say one. Okay, mine.
Yeah.
If it's one, it's mine. But I have a couple. Yeah, I have a couple.
Okay.
There's Mic Check. There's a lot. Legally Clueless. There's Sambaza. Yeah, I have a couple. Yeah.
Oh, for me, like you said, that's like asking a musician which is one of your best songs. So if I told you which is your best song,
Yeah,
there's so
so
much.
difficult.
True.
Yeah, it's
so
difficult.
that will be hurtful. But I'll say I take time to listen to podcasts. A lot of podcasts that are out there. Some stand out, but I'm not going to say that I'm not going to say that this is the best podcast out there. But I'd like to give a shout out to, and he's joined 2 podcasts that have come up, and these are because I know them. I'm a bit biased on this one. There's 2 Nilots in a pod, and there's Jen and Walk by Accident podcast, we collaborate together. That's a shameless plug. Who we work with every Wednesday. But 2 Nilots in a pod. I've seen this guy come off from being a photographer, and then I encouraged him to get into podcasting. Now he's a podcaster and found a great co-host that they just gel together. Now, if you want to start a podcast, a video podcast, or video pod as we call them, I think they're one of the people you want to go take a look at in terms of how they have chemistry together with a host and a co-host. And it's quite entertaining. That's my spiel for the day, and I'm not going to say it's one of the best. It's the best, but it's one of the best that I listen to. And yeah, there are a lot of podcasts that are out there that are worth listening to, and I'm busy discovering new podcasts as they come along. So that's my catch-22 with the podcast, and yeah, I plead the fifth on that question. It's one of the hardest questions to.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it's a new podcast, but it's Trevor Noah's What Now podcast, and I like, first and foremost, I like the personality. I like the brand, the Trevor Noah brand, and then him being a podcaster just makes it easy for me to like consume the kind of content he curates. And there's so many other African podcasters I listen to as well, but I said just one, so I'm going to lead by example, and I'll just mention one podcaster. Yeah. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope we do this again. It's been very insightful. I've learned so much from both of you, trust me, and I'll make sure I follow you guys and I listen to your podcast as well. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah.
Definitely. We're
Thank you for
giving a
having us.
You're saying something now, see?
No, I'm saying it was a great session.
Oh, okay.
And B, I'll be celebrating 100 episodes this month, so I'm super
Congratulations.
excited for that. So check out my podcast, Unspoken Podcast, on all platforms, on Jollof Radio, on AfriPods, everywhere, on Spotify, on YouTube. Check out that 100 episode special is coming this month.
Okay, I got a question. Awiti, are you going to do cake and something, a celebration, with 100 on it,
Definitely.
include
Definitely.
right.
There's a celebration on 27th November. That's the day that the 100th episode is coming, and it's been a long way coming. So I have to celebrate myself.
Of course. Well done.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So keep up for that.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Good night.
All right, thank you
Bye.
so much for
Thank
joining,
you.
everybody.
Meet you all.
Thank you. It's really
Bye.
nice
Thank
to hear
you.
about everybody's podcasting journey. Thank you for joining. So we'll end it for tonight until our next episode, which is going to be coming in another 2 weeks' time.
Oh, so thank you so much,
Yeah, thanks for
Jollof and
joining.
everyone,
Bye, guys.
everyone for joining. Bye.
Hi, everyone.